I got it right this time.
Woo! They did not shaft us on the countdown.
It's
and
3.
Say you're going live early.
Maybe 3.5, but I definitely think it's 3. At least my kind of 3.
Either way, hey, we're here. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Zocalo. This is your one-stop shop for all things Babylon 5 and then some on a rare occasion. Today, we are doing a deep dive, and we have not done one in a while, so I'm super excited. And we're going to get to the ins and outs of By Any Means Necessary, a season 1 episode about workers' rights. Power to the people.
I love that, BC. Hi, BC. You're in the chat. Hi, Super Dave. Thanks for catching the show. Hi, Colin. Thanks for catching the stream. So BC says,
oh, wow. Colin's here. He's across the pond. It's got to be late for him. Wow. Thank you for joining in.
Across the pond as in merry old England?
As in the old UK.
Oh, well, welcome. Glad you're here. And then BC says, in Soviet Russia, stream catches you.
Love it. Yes, it do. Yes, it do. Yeah, so we're here. And boy, you know, 2020 time is really, I don't know if it's been just mental for you, but I forget what day it is most of the time. We did have to take last week off because I had a back drama problem. You had a house drama problem. And so
yeah,
it's just one thing after another in this year.
I've accepted the fact that life just is, you know, and the universe provides and faith manages. I mean, that's really all that we can, knowing that you can't really change or even try and attempt to like massage things into the directions that we want them to be. You just kind of have to give it up to it is what the universe provides us with, and we just have to work with it. Right?
It's true. It's true. There's a lot of things that we cannot change. And really a lot of what we can change is how we react to it. How do we approach what we do in response?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good segue into not talking about it yet because we still have things to do. We have tradition to uphold and news to talk about. But that's pretty much kind of like the nuts and bolts of, I think, why we gravitated towards By Any Means Necessary, because one, we were talking about some of Sinclair's best moments in a previous show recently.
That's right. And we always try to piggyback our topics one after another from something we mentioned in a previous show.
And two, it's because sometimes you try and make the best, you try and win on every possible level that you can, or at least the ones that make the most impact. And I think that that's where Sinclair is with By Any Means Necessary. You're not going to win every battle, but you're going to win the important ones.
Right. And you try to do the very best you can in that situation. You try to make as many people happy as possible. But as this episode does illustrate, there's consequences down the road. You're not going to get the perfect solution for everybody, but you're going to get better. You're going to get good enough.
And there's compromise when you come to the table and negotiate, right? So to borrow a Star Trek axiom that fairly fits into this whole paradigm, the needs of the many, which are the dock workers, outweigh the needs of the few, which are the bureaucrats or Zawan.
Zawan. There you go again with that. I love it.
I'm going to trademark that.
Nice. All right. So let's, before we get into By Any Means Necessary, I do think we need to bring up that the great maker, Joe Straczynski, has a fantastic book on the horizon. He announced it in this last week. So I would love to talk about this book, Together We Will Go, his first fictitious novel that's going to be released July 6th, 2021. So a little more than half a year from now.
That is some heads up marketing in case you want to get your ducats in line.
Yes, you can pre-order it right now.
Yes. And if you aren't in kind of the normal kind of like lanes of finding this book, your Amazons and your Barnes and Nobles of the world, of which I am not anymore. I've completely cut ties with all those services. You can order directly from Simon & Schuster.
That's what I'm going to do then. I don't know if that gives Joe more of the share of the profits, but I'm kind of doing what you're doing. I'm trying to avoid the big nasty corporations that don't need more of our money and giving it more to the little guys, the local businesses, the ones that are really hurting right now, who could use all the support they can get.
Absolutely. If you don't mind, let's get into Together We Will Go, and then we'll answer some of the questions, because there are some questions.
Oh, cool.
Comments.
Okay. Yeah. So let's get through this. I want to spend just the briefest of moments on the book, but I felt we got to say something because this sounds like a heck of a book. And Norm, you and I were talking before the show. Joe has already said this might be one of the best things I've ever written. He actually said that. And for Joe to say that is very rare. I mean, he doesn't often brag about his work like, yeah, this is amazing, I can't wait to show it to you guys. He actually did that for this one, which means he thinks a lot of it. And so if he thinks a lot of it, I'm gonna too. Absolutely.
And also he said something along the lines of this may be my best work I've ever written, and if possible, I would be happy if that was my epitaph on his tombstone. So, you know, big Joe, that's pretty out of character for Joe, because he doesn't really self-aggrandize. So
no,
right.
So I think we've got a big piece of literature coming down the pipe here if he's thinking that much of it. So let's do a quick synopsis in case our viewers aren't aware of what this book is about. Here it is. The Breakfast Club meets the Silver Linings Playbook in this powerful, provocative, and heartfelt novel about 12 endearing strangers who come together to make the most of their final days. From New York Times bestselling and award-winning author J. Michael Straczynski. Mark Antonelli, a failed young writer looking down the barrel at 30, is planning a cross-country road trip. He buys a beat-up old tour bus. He hires a young Army vet to drive it. He puts out an ad for others to join him along the way. But this will be a road trip like no other. His passengers are all fellow disheartened souls who have decided that this will be their final journey. Upon arrival in San Francisco, they will find a cliff with an amazing view of the ocean at sunset, hit the gas, and drive out of this world. Right? Okay, so we got some big themes we're going to be getting into in this book. Can you tell?
Yeah, it's feeling like Midnight Nation on steroids with a little dash of Thelma and Louise.
It's going to make Midnight Nation look like child's play, if you ask me. When you're talking about ending your life, your right to die, going out on your terms, what does that mean? Anyway, continuing with the synopsis. Here we go. The unlikely companions include a young woman with a chronic pain sensory disorder and another who was relentlessly bullied at school for her size, a bipolar, party-loving neo-hippie, a gentle coder with a literal hole in his heart and blue skin, and a poet dreaming of a better world beyond this one. We get to know them through access to their texts, emails, voicemails, and the daily journal entries they write as the price of admission for this trip. By turns tragic, funny, quirky, charming, and deeply moving, Together We Will Go explores the decisions that brings these characters together and the relationships that grow between them, with some discovering love and affection for the first time. But as they cross state lines and complications to the initial plan arise, it becomes clear that this is a novel as much as about the will to live as the choice to end it. The final, unforgettable moment as they hurtle toward their decisions awaiting them will be remembered for a lifetime. Yeah, it's going to get heavy, but it's also probably going to make us laugh out loud. I'm expecting this will be right up there with Becoming Superman in terms of like an emotional level.
Well, I'm hoping that he's already optioning this for either some type of mini TV series, say on Netflix, like he did with Sense8, or even opting it for a movie because he has Academy Award-winning clout because of The Changeling, starring Angelina Jolie, written by him and directed by Ron Howard. So, I mean, sorry, Clint Eastwood, produced by Ron Howard. So,
almost Ron Howard. He wanted to, and then had to pass it on to Eastwood, if I'm recalling correctly.
Almost Ron Howard.
Yeah. So, I can definitely see the potential for either of those scenarios, and you bet, of course, I would watch it. There's also going to be an audio book in the works. We don't have any information about that yet, but you and I were texting about this. Wouldn't it be amazing? I mean, we know some talented folks from Babylon 5 who might be able to voice some of these characters. Maybe a little reunion would be all right.
I think that would probably be like the best of both worlds, because if you're looking at 12 characters, people that could probably voice these characters, unless these characters are significantly younger. But of course, you have Bruce Boxleitner, Mira Furlan, Claudia Christian. You have Peter Jurassic. You have Jason Carter. You have
Pat Tallman.
Yeah. And then Billy Mumy.
Of course. And a lot of them do voice work. I mean, I think Mira has done several projects. Claudia does a lot of voice work for video games, especially. So it's not like this would be a brand new thing for them. It would be amazing if this could somehow get incorporated with some B5 folks just for kicks and giggles. Because Peter Jurasik did a fantastic narration for Becoming Superman. Yeah. And somebody on Twitter mentioned, hey, you could get him to do it. And Joe said, yes, that would be great. But there's a lot of different characters that need distinctive voices for this kind of project. So.
Right. And not to exclude Robin Atkins Downs and, of course, Tracy Scoggins.
Right. You know. They're still here, too.
So,
there's lots of potential there. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I'm very excited. This sounds like a heck of a read.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fantastic, and we only have half a year to wait for it. So
only.
But and believe me,
there's no shortage of things to do in the meantime.
We're going to cover it here on the Zocalo when that drops, because we did a 4-part deep dive into Becoming Superman, I believe, 4 or 5,
or was it 3?
Was it 3?
3 or 4? That was
it was definitely
a year ago now.
Yeah, definitely.
And a year ago in 2020 time was a century, so I don't remember crap.
That's true.
I mean, seriously, my memory anymore, I don't know what's what.
6 months for this year equates to like 6 years in like normal time, right?
I agree. You know, there are some weeks that feel like whole years right now. So anyway, enough on that. You wanted to get to some comments. Let's do that.
Well, let's do a Valtu before we forget.
All right, let's do that. To Joe, celebrating a new work, and to you for tuning in out there. Valtu.
Yeah, just a couple of small questions I wanted to answer. So Colin, since this is his first time here, I thought I would indulge him on the collection. So Colin, you said just clock the swords. Nice. Couple of medieval European ones. Yes. Katana. Yes. Wakazashi's. No. Actually, the top one is it's an arming sword for 133 practice. Below that is a Scottish dirk. Below that is Mythos's sword from Highlander, which is also an arming sword.
Nice.
Also known as the sword. I think it was like the Ivanhoe sword from the Noble Collection. If you look through Noble Collection catalogs, wanting to buy everything, but realizing that that's a bad rabbit hole to go down.
Probably expensive.
The 3 ivory-handled swords here are from my Highlander collection: Duncan MacLeod, Connor MacLeod, and Duncan MacLeod Part 2. But the bottom sword, that's actually a lethally sharp sword. That's my cutting sword, also an arming sword. I'm a big fan of arming swords, so they're the short swords that you would wear in the cities with little shields, because that was the thing at the time. Anyway, that's my thing, because I don't like going up against tall, giant German people with tall, giant German swords. That's not me. I'm a small Asian guy. It doesn't work, you know. Okay, so let's see. BC says mummy. Mummy, it's Moomy, right? I keep saying mummy. It's Moomy. I always say
Billy Moomy.
Billy Moomy. Earl Green says, man, I'm still shelling out to hear 80-something Tom Baker imitate 40-something Tom Baker. Age doesn't always show. You are correct, Earl. Yes. I, too, am waiting for him to imitate himself. Yes. That was a terrible Tom Baker. I can't get as low. Tom Baker has a very deep voice.
Yeah.
Also very signature. You know, he always draws out his vowels. Yes.
Distinctive. Very distinctive. I like Super Dave's comment about everybody having a voice. A friend said to me once that one of his favorite voice actors said, everybody is a voice actor. No one has your voice. Well, that's true.
That's true. Yeah. And everything that goes in there, like some people keep their voice pure and clean because they live a clean life. Others they've been known for their voice because their voice has suffered a lot of, like, say, cigarette, pipe smoking abuse.
Sure. Makes a nice gravelly voice, which for a while can give a nice distinctive texture. And then if you notice later on as the years go by, that can go downhill really fast, unfortunately, along with health.
It doesn't age well at all. At all.
Well, you know, what's funny with Boxleitner and his gravelly voices, I don't think he smokes. I mean, it looks like he's in pretty good health, but he does have a little bit of a gravelly intonation to his voice as Sheridan, not necessarily with all of his characters, though.
No, just as Sheridan, and especially like aged Sheridan, and in fact, not so much aged Sheridan in The Lost Tales, but aged Sheridan at the end of Sleeping in Light.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he even said in an interview that he purposefully tried to age himself through, accentuating certain things in his voice, like a lot of that stuff.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah.
Wow. That was good thought and care that he put into that process.
A little snug. It must have shrank in the closet. Yes, that must have been it. Don't get me started.
Yes, of course that was it. I mean,
don't get me started.
Me too.
All right, Char, what do you say we jump into the episode?
Let's do this. We have got so much ground to cover.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you need a quick refresher on By Any Means Necessary, we have a synopsis from the B5 Wiki, and it says, an accident in the docking bay starts as a series of problems on Babylon 5. The dock workers demand better conditions or they'll go on strike. Char has to get a replacement Jaquan F plant for an important religious ceremony. This was written by Catherine M. Drennan, whom you might know as JMS's wife, former wife, directed by Jim Johnston, and this was the 12th episode of season 1. So I want to kind of break this one down by our key players and where they're coming from in terms of how they play their part in these negotiations as they go down. Does that sound good to you?
That sounds fantastic. Let her rip.
Okay, so to give a real rundown of who we're going to be discussing here, we have, of course, Commander Sinclair, basically the guy who has to play negotiator, who's caught in the middle of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Neo Mcconnelly, who is a true champion of the worker caste. She is worker caste through and through, fighting for the dock workers and their needs that are beyond overdue. On the other side of things, we have Senator Hidoshi, who is, I would say, a fairly typical politician. I mean, he is kind of, he's not necessarily a bad guy because he's a bean counting, you know what, but he also is going to play that whole thing of, well, there's not a whole lot I can do, but, blah, 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 blah. He's going to try and lead it on. Maybe if you find a way to make it work, you could go with that. That's cool.
Commander Sinclair, my hands are tied.
Exactly. Yeah. If there's a way, I want you to find it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Sure.
Now, in his defense, he has interests that are beyond Babylon 5. He's more of the bigger picture type of person, very typical of a politician. So there's that. Right. And then, of course, we have my favorite, Oren Zento, who, should we put a warning on this one? Because I have a name for him, and it's not kind.
I'll have to do it after the fact, but yeah, I can edit that.
Okay. He's a bitch boy. And that's what I'm going to call him for the rest of the show. He's really good at playing the victim in these negotiations, and I don't have a lot of nice things to say about him. Screw this guy. And then among the workers, we have basically the rep. It's the voice of the people, Eduardo Del Vientos. Yeah. He's not necessarily the biggest player in these events, but he's the key emotional draw. He loses his brother, reminding us that we can lose our loved ones at a moment's notice. And so he kind of drives the direction that the rest of the workers go through the whole rest of the episode.
Right.
So he does have an important thing. And then, of course, we have the rest of the workers who are pawns in these bigger games. They've gotten thrown around a lot and they're tired of it.
They always are. And that's interesting that this type of dynamic, the struggle for workers' rights and, the equality, of their paid wage labor is still at play here in 2257, 2258 in that era.
58.
And, this is something that's prevalent to modern day, as workers' unions and labor unions are always struggling to basically have their workers get paid minimum wage. Now, minimum wage, in the kind of like the vernacular of looking at, under socialism or socialism type definitions, minimum wage is the minimum amount of money that an employer believes your work worth is.
Yeah, they are putting a value on your time, your energy, and your life.
Right. Minimum.
Minimum.
If they could drive the minimum down more, they would.
Right. Yeah, They will get away with whatever they can get away with. And since we're talking about the workers, let's just continue with that. I mean, they probably get paid just enough to live. They need their jobs. They probably don't have a lot of flexibility in terms of their work options. You know, I think a lot of people go to Babylon 5, you know, hoping for a better life, and they get there and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's probably about the same as what they'd get on Earth. And that doesn't give them a lot of room to go out and maybe pursue other opportunities and live a little bit of luxury here and there. No, they are just scraping by, trying to survive. And unfortunately, they are also doing it in very stressful and kind of just lousy conditions. I mean, even though B5 went online not that long ago, they so shabbily put this station together that it already needs massive upgrades just to keep up with demand.
Right. You know, the bigger global picture of this all. So you have this Babylon 5 consortium, the Babylon 5 Council that put this together with basically the major powers, you know, that not the minor powers, but you have anyone who's on the major council, right, has a stake and has invested themselves into creating Babylon 5. Now, first of all, it must have been really, really difficult to get workers on Babylon 5 unless they were truly desperate, because Babylons 1 through 4 faced all different types of peril. Either exploded or disappeared or exploded again, right? So they were all
probably got only so many Jinxos.
Exactly, Jinxo. That's a good reference. You know, but the thing is with the workers there is that, yeah, they were probably promised, you know, some type of contract. Under the contracts, you know, some type of livable wage or working wage, and under that, you know, this is where like this episode kind of draws the distinction between the Star Trek socialist utopian future and something that's more of a continuation of basically what life is like now. All it is that it's a couple hundred years in the future. That's it. That's the difference. You know, you're still under, you know, extreme labor conditions. You're still kind of like struggling to just basically survive and pay the rent, because there is rent on Babylon 5 to eat.
There sure is. Yes, you got to have credits. Now, question for you, our listeners. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's just like, and not like succumb to the whims of, okay, this is my menial life, and I'm gonna, you know, try and drink my way out of it or abuse my way out of it through substances, dust, whatever, right?
Sure.
How, you know, that's a huge, just tonally different attitude, look and feel to, say, you know, Star Trek, you know, especially to the next generation, not necessarily Deep Space Nine, but definitely to the next generation and even to Voyager in some respects.
Sure. Right. Because I mean, your life is scarcity in that future. You're not going to go hungry. You have a place to live. You don't have to worry about money, and you can pursue your dreams, whatever they are, without the reality of life buckling down on you like bills, because there really aren't any. Now, does that depress you at all? The B5 future, in the sense where a lot of the same problems that we're facing right now are still happening 200 years from now. We haven't improved this.
Only if you look at it from kind of like a Terran-based way of life, because obviously if you embraced, say, if humanity or parts of humanity on the station embraced, say, the Minbari culture, they seek the truth of life. They seek out how to understand the mysteries of life, and they live very, very Spartanly. You know, they don't really want for anything, because spirituality is their guiding principle. You know, the closer to true spirituality that you can become, they don't really bother with the material possessions of life. So they're on a completely different path. Now, the Centauri, completely 180 degrees from that, because it's
they're the opposite. You're right. You're right. Yeah, that everything, it's all money, wealth, power, affluence, you name it. Yeah, no, that's a really good comparison to make. Also, in the comments, Colin has a great kind of check for us as Americans. He says in the UK, there's a distinction between minimum wage and living wage. Okay, meaning, is minimum wage necessarily in line with living wage? Is it a little more congruent than what we're experiencing here in the United States, where you can't live anywhere off of one income on minimum wage working full time?
No, not in the United States. And that's because partially, you know, to put a little bit more of a kind of like a socio-political angle on this, you know, there are so many things that we have to pay for that aren't provided for, that, if you believe in one political strain or over another, certain things like universal health care, being able to afford housing, affordable housing, things of that nature, where, you don't have to live paycheck to paycheck that way. So those needs are provided, which allows you to, not have to fend for just the most basic needs of life. And being able to, and struggling, going back to the workers, the dock workers on Babylon 5, just them struggling to, to survive loading in cargo from so many different alien ships. They have to use, these gravity load lifters, those things that vibrate you till your bones feel like jelly. I mean, those things are hard on the body, right? Working in zero gravity,
physical work.
Yeah. And what happened to Eduardo's brother, it was substandard equipment that could have easily been taken care of. And all you had to do was just try and approve funding for Babylon 5 so that some type of international or incident regarding, saying, like the Jaquan F plant, which could have been an not international, but intergalactic incident against the Narn regime, that wouldn't have happened, right? There wasn't something that they wouldn't, first of all, blame the station for, and secondly, penalize them for financially. So that's a big deal, when you really think about it. And again, once again, the workers are to blame when it's really not their fault.
But they get the rap for it because they are the ones who screwed up. There's some great stuff going on in the comments talking about minimum wage versus, living wage. Yeah, thank you. Couldn't think of the words. So minimum wage is the legal requirement. Living wage is what you actually need to live. And so it sounds like everybody is struggling with that sort of thing. Doesn't really matter where you are, but yeah, we know it's not good here whatsoever. And apparently on Babylon 5, I mean, not great either. Earl says that this is not a surprise, but it's depressing. And I agree. I think maybe that's what I was feeling when I was rewatching this episode in prep for the show, is that just, I guess Star Trek does set us up to want a better future. That's why we watch it. It gives us hope. And Babylon 5 is much more realistic in the sense of, you know what, we've had these problems for centuries. They're not going to go anywhere, or they're not going to go away just because we've gone into space.
Right. And one of the things I always find puzzling about it is that, you're dealing a lot with, most, if not all of the dock workers, if I remember, they're all human. So you're dealing with being able to control them in a way, under basically the financial constraints of future capitalism, right? Because it's the capitalist powers that be that run Babylon 5 up to a point. None of the major alien races like the Minbari or the Vorlons or even the Narn or the Centauri, they're not really interested in the ongoing day-to-day minutia of running the station. That's the Earth Alliance's responsibility. But it's also the Earth Alliance's responsibility to make sure that those, whatever that they're bringing in, whether it's ships, goods, personnel, ambassadors, makes that run smoothly. But if you don't have the right equipment and you're working your wage laborists to death, literally, then there's got to be something. I'm surprised that the other governors or the governments didn't intervene on behalf of the station. I mean, I'm sure that there's technologies involved that they could kick in that would make things so much easier.
Which makes you wonder why. Is it just pure apathy? Like, it's not our problem. We're not going to deal with it unless asked. Because anybody ask?
I mean, no. I mean, and the thing is with the Minbari, they always say that, we have this technology that's so much better. We have a system that's so much better. I mean, everything with the Minbari is so much more like better, streamlined, spiritually satisfying.
Yeah, so they're older. They've got more wisdom to depart than we have.
And technology. Remember.
Or here's another thought. Earth arrogance. If we command the station, we're doing it our way and we want you to butt out. You're involved only so far. So maybe they don't have the ability to say, hey, we could help you out here, and Earth just kind of buzz off.
Well, I think that is part of like the Babylon Charter, is that the other races invest and Earth Alliance runs and governs, right, the station, which is why at one point in time, you only saw human security guards. At one point in time, you only really saw, for the most part, human-run businesses on Babylon 5.
Right, for a good while. I mean, that changed over time. Probably most when Babylon 5 broke away from Earth and there was more opportunity for other people to come in. But yeah, I think you're right. I think Earth dominance just kind of, they were the nuts and bolts of Babylon 5. all your workers are going to be humans, which is why we're dealing with the Earth Senate and that sort of a thing. We have a human negotiator in Orinzento, and the other governments are staying out of it. Notably staying out of it, apparently.
Yeah.
I want to say hi to Terry Lynn, who is here. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Terry.
Glad you're here. And I'm glad you like the background. I did it. I barely remembered right before the show, too. I thought, oh, shoot, I should put the green screen down because I set it up above my whiteboard and then I've got it clipped up. All I do is take it down, stretch it out, and then off we go. And I mean, for the most part, it's working today. I can improve upon it, but I do need a Babylon 5 background. I just didn't have the time to take care of that today. So
next time.
Next time. There's plenty of time next time, right? Boom today, boom tomorrow, green screen tomorrow, that sort of thing.
Yeah, let's get into Neil Mcconnelly, because she's one of the more refreshing guest characters that we've gotten. And she was only referenced like one more time. I think she was referenced in it was with Max and not Max.
Mac and Bo? No.
Mac and Bo. Yeah.
Was she was
referenced, but it was like really, it was just really quick in passing, I believe. But she was only referenced like one more time about being kind of like in charge of like workers' rights.
Okay. Which is a shame. I mean, she makes an impression. It would have been very cool to have her as a semi-regular kind of character, or just at least somebody who makes an appearance once a season or two.
Yeah. Just part of the fabric, like in the background, she's there, but she's not a major character.
Yeah. Just let us know that she's still there running things.
But I like that, she comes from a history of basically of organized laborists, and fighting for workers' rights, and I'm glad that she's there in a way, but I'm also kind of, not saddened or disappointed, but I'm just kind of like, I can't believe that this is still going on in the future. Right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have to kind of get past that just to invest into the story, right? Otherwise, you're just, I'm not in a good mood anymore. I need other escapist entertainment. I got to move on.
Yeah, but I also like that, because it's so real and because it's dealing with so many real-time issues in the future. I think this episode in particular is one of the episodes that made Babylon 5 stand out against like the almost, saccharine-y, perfect utopian future that Star Trek was trying to deliver. Because I don't really believe that it's going to be that way per se. I think it's going to be somewhere between not as dark and as specific, to the human plight as say Deep Space Nine is, but not necessarily so utopianly perfect as say Star Trek: The Next Generation is. Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to keep going with Neoma here because I don't know. Watching this I think yesterday, wrapping it up, man, I really adore her. She is the worker caste through and through. You can tell that she grew up in a working class family. And later on, she mentions her dad in a notable quote where he said, there's no happy endings, just new battles. So she knows this life very well. And she kind of, I get the impression that when they enter into this situation, this is not her first rodeo of negotiations. She has been fighting for a long time for her workers to get better equipment, upgrades, better wages, that sort of a thing, to hire more people, and has simply not been able to get her way. She's sick of being pushed around, and this is the line, and she knows it. And she's very smart about that. She realizes this is the opportunity, and I'm fighting till the very end. And you know what's great is she doesn't ever lose her cool. I mean, things get heated, but it's never like unsalvageable. You know what I mean?
Well, she's a good negotiator, and she knows what she wants, and she knows where she needs to win and where she needs to compromise, right? Because not everything can be a win.
It's true. And she's being very reasonable, in my opinion. It's not an all or nothing thing.
Right. But she just wants to make sure that, at the very end of the day, that certain workers' rights, especially equipment and especially safety protocols. I mean, those are kind of like, those are the basic needs that workers, they should never have to demand. For example, one of the reasons why I stopped, supporting Amazon is because, at the very beginning of the COVID outbreak, there their warehousers and their drivers and people who handle all of the deliverable goods. They were striking because they weren't given enough PPE from a pretty much like the most lucrative company in the world. They weren't willing to come to the negotiating table and negotiate better PPE for the people that are handling their merchandise on a daily basis, the people that are actually producing the model and keeping that structure alive so that Amazon continue to be profitable. So just give them the basic needs for them to protect themselves against the pandemic. How hard is that for people to come to the table to? Right?
I don't know, man. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me, maybe because I also came from a working class background. I mean, both of my parents worked physical, manual jobs. They're not highly educated. And I mean, coming from that life where you are the person using your body and soul to make the big thing run, and they're just barely giving you the very bare minimum, just enough to make you happy so you can live your life and shut up. Because they don't actually care about you as a person. And that's really disheartening when you're a worker and you give your butt, you bust your butt, you give your best every day. And I mean, a lot of times, and I get the impression, especially from our guy here, Eduardo, he's proud of being a dock worker. This is a family tradition. He loves his job. He likes what he does. And these other folks just want to crap all over that. Why?
That's the bureaucracy, and it's interesting that level of capitalism still exists. In Earth Alliance, again, I'm comparing it to what the only science fiction future that we've really known, in terms of a consistent message and through line, and that's kind of like the socialist utopian perfection post scarcity economical world of Star Trek. But that's not this. So when you see somebody like Eduardo, being an ex-generational, dock worker from family to family to family, and proud of that fact. These workers, they're not saying that they don't like their work or they're not, that happy doing what they do. Right. Obviously, with Eduardo's case, he takes great pride in it. It's just that you have to come to the negotiating table and say, we need to give these workers at least the bare minimum of what they're asking for, just so that their lives aren't in danger. Right?
Right. Yeah, I really don't think that's asking too much. So I'm glad they have a representative like Neoma fighting for that, however small, because it's very big, in fact, that's secured. And she's the right person in the right place. And then she's got to go up against people like Orenzento, who has probably not had to do a whole lot of manual labor. Oh, I don't know, maybe ever in his whole life. He strikes me as that stereotypical guy who probably came from a fairly well-to-do family, got the best education and all of that, works with a little higher society people, and has read some reports about how, well, this equipment should get all of this done. The report says so, so therefore it must be true. And he has no idea. And I loved it when Eduardo came back and said, if we could get some of these bean counters to come into the docks and work, maybe then we'd see some money coming in, because then they'd see how hard it is, right? He is right.
That's the goal. And the thing is that when it comes to kind of like these representational bureaucrats that are sent, on behalf of, say like the B5 financial or B5 Senate committee, just to try and extinguish the situation, Orenzento was never there to negotiate. He was never there to negotiate. Negotiation wasn't in his orders. He was there to put down any particular strike or riot. That's why he was going to enact the Rush Act, which means that, Garibaldi, being from a worker background himself, a worker class background himself.
I'm so glad you're going here. Yeah.
Because this is what happens in real time. You get working class people of one professional spectrum, say police, trying to impose the will of a bureaucracy that they may or may not even believe in, but they're paid to do so, or else they'll lose their jobs if they don't. Yep. Right? Going in there, other workers who they probably have everything in common with. They probably go to the same blue collar bar to probably kick back and have the same beers over the same dartboards, over the same, pretzels and chips as anyone else does after a hard day's work. And it's the bureaucracy that sends both of these working class professions against each other, basically to try and confuse the situation and never really address the problem.
Yeah. And really, that only makes the situation far worse.
Right.
Yes, I'm so glad you pointed that out, because when Garibaldi is sent in, I really feel bad for him, because I mean, they're also workers. They are also there to do a job. And unfortunately, they're doing what I would consider kind of the dirty job. And I feel like a lot of times, like this summer, we had a lot of riots happening in the United States. And yes, there are bad police out there. I understand that that not everybody is good. There are definitely problems within that system, but not all of them are. Some of them are really there to just do their jobs, do good work, uphold the law, and are good, honest, working people who just want to have their lives lived to the very best of their ability. And, that's it. That's a lot of us, right?
Right.
And they're sent to do that job. And how disheartening must that feel when you're going up against folks who, like you said, probably have way more in common with than not, and yet they get their orders and they have a job to do, and they know how it's going to end, and it's going to be dirty.
Well, it's going to end violently. It's going to end with either people like either hurt or killed or both. Mm-hmm. And you know what? We haven't even touched on what what healthcare is covered like on the station, if any. Right. So you're folding,
right?
You're folding in more of that real time dynamic, because, the people that are rioting probably don't have healthcare. The police are probably going to, tax the healthcare that they're on, because, they're going to put themselves in harm's way. And all of this time and resource and energy is all going to waste just because Oren Zento can't come in and negotiate with the, with Mcconnelly and try and find a reasonable situation. And this is where our hero comes in.
Right? Indeed. Before we get into that, I would love to jump into a little bit of comments. BC wants to know, are we going to touch on who the Rush Act was named after? First things first, I want to mention, little t-shirt action there.
There's a reason why I wore this.
Hey, oh, was that intentional?
Yeah, the Rush Act.
Oh, okay. Well, I should have thought about that. I clearly didn't, but I know how much you like Rush. It wouldn't surprise me if you're wearing a Rush t-shirt every day,
I do.
But hey, yo, well done. Hey, just for the record, I have a Sense8 callback on my shirt. I'll stand up one sec.
Oh, nice.
See that?
Well, but nice.
Weird but nice.
Yeah.
Yes, if you've seen Sense8, you probably understand that reference. I saw this shirt, I think on Redbubble, and I had to have it.
Nice. Weird but nice.
Yeah, that's me. Anyway, Terry Lynn wants to know if there were ever any kind of weak female characters in Babylon 5. And I would say for the most part, no. That was never really a characterization I would give to any character on Babylon 5. Female, male, otherwise.
Even Julia Masanti was strong in her own way.
Sure, just in her way.
Yeah. And Linda Stee, she was strong in her own way.
Well, yeah, she liked to murder Narn.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's
she was good at something. We'll say that much about her.
So was Julia Masanti, obviously.
Yeah, and she's problematic. I'm sorry. I have to rip on her every chance I get, just to kind of on you.
We never did that show. We were always supposed to bring in these less than savory characters, from B5, like Linda Stee, like Julia Masanti, even to some degree, that's not here nor there. That's an idea topic that we can discuss for the next show.
The characters we don't like.
Characters that were colorful, so to speak.
Oh, there's many definitions for that. Well, that could make an interesting list.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's a thought. Yeah, also, you could put Oren Zento on there, maybe.
Oh, well, Oren, there's not a lot to, for a character that has probably one of the biggest, possible dynamics in the show. He didn't really, there's nothing really about him there that was as interesting, say, than Naomi or even Eduardo, because all Oren Zento was a mouthpiece for the bureaucracy. And that's
true. I guess he is a little two-dimensional, and he goes in, he plays his part, and he accomplishes exactly what he wants, which is to invoke the Rush Act.
Right.
Yeah, he is a shitpot stirrer. He's not there to actually negotiate or make peace or make sure there's a good resolution that comes out of this. No. He's basically there to agitate and incite. And I hate to say it, but he does a good job.
Well, I mean, his attitude, I mean, the actor who played him, he was also like, my hands are tied. I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
We're doing what we can. Don't blame me. I'm not the bad guy. Don't kill the messenger. I'm just trying to help. Yeah, he's helping.
I mean, if there is a weakness that I can find in this episode, it really is more kind of like the stereotype that he plays a little too on the nose, because there's little no subtlety with him, and a negotiator of his level would have tried to at least tried to gaslight Connelly and saying like, look, or gaslight the workers and saying like, look, it's not my fault, really, it's your fault. You should have really checked your equipment, and someone
that's true. He could be victim blaming, and he didn't, not entirely.
No, and that's where I think that a character like him just came in as like the stick and not so much the carrot, because someone who knows how to play the negotiation game much better would have put, Naomi. Do I say that right? I keep saying it wrong.
Neoma.
Naomi.
Are you thinking Naomi Wildman from Voyager?
Maybe Neoma Connelly. I'm terrible with names.
It's not a terribly common name.
But Neoma, Eve Sheridan, and Eduardo, putting them all on kind of like the defensive, because they're like, look, I understand what you're going through, but we took a look and researched that equipment, and it looks like your dock workers weren't maintaining that to spec on a daily basis. We've looked at their reports. So if we had better reports on that, we probably would be able to open up some funding for you, because no matter how hard they tried, the equipment just failed on them. But they neglected their equipment, so there's nothing I can do.
So then, you know what? You could make an argument that he's not even a good bitch boy. He's just a bitch, because he didn't even have that level of smarminess to displace the blame on the workers and make them feel bad about themselves and make them question whether or not they had something to do with this whole incident, make it feel like it's their fault. He didn't.
That's where I think this character probably would have been just a little bit more robust and a little bit more. It's kind of like these characters that you want to hate. There is a little bit of a sympathetic tone that they try and establish, because they're like, look, I'm not the bad guy. I'm on your side. I really am.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But here's the data that I tried to use to prove to the Senate that that I'm trying to increase your funding. But these are the points that they shot me down with, and I just have to tell you the truth. It's not my fault. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm not blaming the writers, and I'm not casting aspersion there, but I'm just saying that Joe, right, he has that knack of being able to write those types of characters, kind of like Cartagia. Like Cartagia, he's like, it's not my fault. I'm like, I'm not crazy. Like, everyone loves me because I'm a god, and why wouldn't you love a god? So like,
right. As Colin says in the comments, lovely chap.
I love that. So Terry Lynn says, Norm, explain again how the senator gets off giving orders to the military. That, in my opinion, was the weak side of this episode, because much like it's the Senate, it's the Babylon 5 Senate Oversight Committee, basically meaning that they have governance of Babylon 5 through the powers of the Earth Alliance. That's their charter. So any senator that belongs to that charter has military oversight over the station.
That's how I understand it too.
Via the office of the president, working through the Senate Oversight Committee. It's just kind of like how do, say, senators of our government, how do they have the right to question or order, not even like the military, but, say even question, like, say, Amy Coney Barrett, who came in there and, she's part of this. I mean, she's part of President Trump's, appointee. But the thing is that she still has to fall under the jurisdiction of an oversight committee. So,
yeah.
Right.
So then you have the hearings and all of that. Right.
And basically in the Earth Alliance, whoever controls the money controls the people.
Yeah, and that's special. Right. Well, speaking of the Senate, let's go into a little more detail, just a tiny bit, on Senator Hidoshi, who is, I think, much like Sinclair, trying to straddle a lot of situations at once here. He has to serve the interests of the Senate because he is a senator, and he has to answer to his peers about what's happening, because he's basically acting as the representative to Babylon 5 on behalf of the Senate and their interests. Mm-hmm. And he's got to think about bigger picture things like interstellar relations. How is this going to look from EarthScov's point of view. He has to consider things that Sinclair isn't necessarily caring about, but he also has to point those things out to Sinclair. He has to keep Sinclair kind of in line. I mean, these are very difficult positions to be in. And when you're a politician, that's kind of your wheelhouse. You're doing this on a constant basis. Now, there were comments a little while ago about, hey, Senator Hidoshi wasn't a terribly bad guy. I don't think he's a bad guy either. He's just a politician doing his job and doing the best he can from his perspective. It's not always great, but it's not terrible either.
Now, I would have loved to have seen like a little bit more bounce back between, say, the station and maybe like, the Senate on Earth, and just kind of see like what their whole dynamic was behind the scenes in the shadows, because like not later on until like say season 4 when Sheridan finally gets to Earth and he meets with President, was it Lutsenko, you got to see like the politics involved in the behind the scenes, but
man, could you imagine if they'd had the budget having a set of the Earth Senate and watching them debate these things? Like he comes back and he says, this is where things stand right now, basically giving a little bit of an exposition update, if you will. And then just, rabble, and then hearing them kind of argue it out, and we hear their perspective a little more.
Right. And I always wanted to see that reverse shot where, say, Sinclair, in his office is talking to Hidoshi, then all of a sudden you see Sinclair on the screen, but it's from the senator's office. It's from that side of the wall, so to speak. And all of a sudden, you have other people that you can't see on screen, say like, Clark, right? This is before he's president. So you got to see Clark there, maybe even Marie Crane there, talking to him, because they're all involved in some way, shape or form, or even some other politicians that we got to see later on down the road. So I always wanted to see kind of this, the lives on, back on Earth, and the bureaucracy that was fighting for Babylon 5 or trying to undermine Babylon 5, and see how those players, worked their dynamic behind the scenes. I thought that would have been really interesting.
Oh man. Yeah. Had Babylon 5 had a bigger budget, Joe probably would have gone there. I'm sure he had to consider that often, and it wasn't in the cards. But, let's say if we ever got that remake where we do like a redo of the show with a better budget and better special effects and all the things. I don't want this to happen, but if we did, it would be awesome to give another take with those things added.
Well, it's kind of like, say for instance, say Cisco, or using Deep Space Nine as an allegory, like Cisco talking all the way back to, the Federation, on Earth. And then, saying like, Cisco saying like, hey, we need help out here. And then, the Earth, the president, or the powers that be, the admirals, like in that room are like, hey man, you're on your own. We're doing the best we can, but we got our own problems, but just seeing that, knowing that, there is sort of like this isolationism that's kind of like, baked into the show.
The growing isolation, no less.
Right.
Especially as I'm thinking from Earth's perspective too, where as President Clark comes in and wants he creates more of an insular environment, and how that affects Babylon 5 and the back and forth on that would be an interesting stark contrast.
Right. And one of the things that we see kind of like devolve or dissolve throughout the course of seasons 1 and 2 is like less and less and less of the interference from senators or the oversight committee pushing around, say Sinclair, especially after season 1, since he's not there anymore. But even in some degree, even Sheridan has to kind of like toe the line, for the oversight committee. But, it dwindles over time, because it was just a dynamic that really just didn't take hold. So you weren't really feeling kind of like the struggle between neutral space and Epsilon 3 and the folks back home, trying to say that, yes, your tax dollars, because remember, we're still working obviously under some type of capitalist model. Your tax dollars are funding what's going on in Babylon 5, which leads to that other time real dynamic of, say, a day in the life of, right? When the reporter, Dan, what's his face, Dan,
what's his face?
Or say douchebag Dan, he cuts in.
That's his name now. Yes. He
cuts and edits this footage saying to the people back home that, Babylon 5 is nothing but a bunch of alien loving hypocrites. Right.
Sure. And so I think about that dynamic where if we saw more things back home, the attitudes of people who maybe don't know a whole lot better, or just downright do believe like, hey, my tax dollars are funding relations with aliens, and like, really, we didn't really get much of that. And Colin makes a great point. The station is the focus of the series. Sure. So of course we're going to spend most of our time there, but it would be cool if we were making the show in this day and age where 42 minutes is not necessarily the time frame you have to stick yourself to anymore. How much more could you add? What more could you do?
Right. And that's where it kind of, just going off on a tangent, that would be the exciting way of seeing Babylon 5 being kind of like restructured in a way where you can take advantage of, the kind of TV that's not network invested TV anymore. And what I mean by invested, like advertisers that are kind of pushing you around, much like.
Right. Yeah. Right? If you do something really super controversial, they can pull their dollars, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Netflix doesn't really give a crap about that. If they like your series, they'll give you 2 seasons.
Well, Joe can do a lot in 2 seasons.
It's true. It's true. He can. Now, let's see here.
We got a few minutes left here.
We haven't even really talked that much about Sinclair. And we haven't even talked at all about the B plot with the Jaquan flower. But I think we're going to have to cut that out just to make time. So let's focus on just Sinclair, if that's cool, because he is the ultimate guy, probably strung out in the most directions with all the people that he has to answer to here. He's got to answer to Senator Hidoshi. He's got to answer to Neo Mcconnelly. He at least has to deal with Zento. And the way he does it is just what I like to call classic Sinclair. He comes up with the solution. It's so brilliantly done here where he looks at the legislation. He looks at the Rush Act and realizes that they've given him some power he didn't have before. And that's how he solves this problem. Right. And he diverts that money for military upgrades or what have you, and gives it to the workers for the upgrades they need instead. Now, is that a perfect solution? No, because what if there's some sort of situation where by not giving the military their budget, does that put Babylon 5 in danger? Do they need that money? Is that putting them at risk in some way? Are there going to be long-term consequences for that? But then, of course, he's got to answer to the Senate later, and he made some enemies by exercising that power, by just doing what he did. And that does come back to bite him later on in season 1.
I think at the time, though, at that time, Sinclair really needed to take a look at the vital few of what was most important in terms of like resolving the situation. And in doing so, he's like, you know what? I'll address the military needs when that time comes. But the first thing we need to do is we need to get the station working again. Right?
Yes, exactly. So it's a triage situation, right? Where this is a much more immediate need because it is past due and it is now. We got to do this now. The military thing, that's going to come down the line. We'll deal with that when the time comes.
We can probably answer the B plot story really quickly because Sinclair does the exact same thing to resolve that situation between Char and Londo by looking
You're reading my mind.
Right? He's looking at the fine print of how to fix everything. Right?
It's true. He's so good at this too. I mean, he solves both of these issues in the same kind of way, all while completely exhausted, by the way. And I really love how Michael O'Hare, he kind of goes a little unshaven as the episode wears on, and it really does make him look tired and haggard. And I think, what does Garibaldi say? He's like, you look like week old bread. Yeah, he kind of does. I agree.
And maybe, and this is, I remember why we kind of focused on this episode because we were talking about Michael O'Hare and, and his mental issue. And maybe this is one of those times where, Joe's like, hey, you know what? Don't fight it. Embrace it. It might work for your performance or,
maybe it did.
And maybe it did. But I think that seeing how fine that Sinclair can walk those lines and come out with a solution is kind of hints towards how eventually when he becomes Valen, why he was able to see in so many different directions at once, why he was able to absorb all of this stress and everyone else's woes and reverse all of that into not the optimal situation, but at least a situation that got everything off of dead center and moving forward.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And Sinclair, again, he is very cool under pressure. This is exactly the kind of person you want in a leadership role in the event of a crisis like this. You don't want somebody freaking out. You don't want somebody who doesn't know what to do. He is incredibly intelligent. He actually does a really fine job of taking action and balancing that with kind of doing the legwork that actually ultimately ends up saving him in all of these situations here, like reading the legislation. And then also, I couldn't help but notice he takes that time to sit with Jakar in the council room and discuss the Jaquan flower. And he's in the middle of an emergency. This should not be a big thing. He's got bigger fish to fry, but he does it knowing that if he doesn't, he could be creating an even bigger situation down the line and wants to nip that in the bud as much as possible. So he lets Jakar talk so that Jakar feels heard. And Sinclair is a man of his word. He does try.
Yes, he does try.
Negotiate this situation. And even though it continues to escalate, he at least did try. So that says a lot about who he is, how he operates. And if I'm Jakar, I recognize that and I say, well, I can't help but respect him. He didn't get me what I wanted, at least at first, but he did what he could.
But I also love the fact that he also expands Jakar's understanding of his own faith, right?
Right, with the whole sunlight thing. Yeah,
I mean,
that was an incredible solution to that problem. I did not see that coming the first time I watched this. It was genius.
So you saw the political, the persuasiveness of Sinclair and how he understands how that world works, but he also understands how powerful also the spiritual, the spiritual importance of Jakar, his faith, or any other faith, and how that works. It's just as important to make sure, as commander of Babylon 5, that he's able to provide for both of those needs simultaneously, because he believes that I believe that he believes that both are as equally important to that person, at this stage, to Eduardo and to Jakar himself, right? Because it's not just about the station, it's not just about this, it's not just about that, and they do kind of dovetail into each other, because if it weren't for the dock worker situation, the Narn ship wouldn't have exploded, destroying the Jaquan F in the process, right?
So I do wonder if Sinclair recognized that and realized this situation is not Jakar's fault.
Right.
And so he's trying to do his best for everybody involved. And so, again, I mean, that's nothing but praise for a very well-balanced, well-rounded guy who can see the whole situation. Kind of, I mean, he's a very good commander.
Well, and knowing that he has the spirit of Valen in him, he knows when to be warrior, when to be worker, and when to be religious.
Even if he doesn't fully get that at the time. Yeah, but it's true.
Right.
It's
but it's
true. He taps into that
inside him. Yeah, it's inside him.
It's so true. I mean, that's amazing that he can shift gears like that, though. And it works so well for him here. Earl says that this might be the best Michael O'Hare did as Sinclair. I think it is one of his very best performances. I don't know if I would call it the very best. It's right at near the top, though.
Well, I think that's why this episode is like one of the most underrated, because at a point in time in my life when I saw this, I was 25 years younger, right? And when I saw it, I'm like, this dude should just come in with the military and swoop down and freaking tell him what's what and how things are. But then you grow up, and then you grow older and wiser, hopefully, and a little bit more experienced, and you see, and there's no greater teacher than life experience. And then you understand that this was the right way to handle the situation like this. There was only really one way, and that is to bring people to the table and talk and compromise, right? And find a solution that benefits everybody, right? Because in the end, it's that old axiom that, a rising tide lifts all boats. That's what he was trying to do. He was trying to make sure that that not just the political or military or financial obligations of his charter were being upheld, but also the spiritual needs of his people that are under his command as well, and his responsibility. So that's, the more and more you watch Sinclair, the more and more you see that, wow, what an incredibly well-written and nuanced character he really was.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to appreciate that the first time you watch really the whole first season. All that's at play here. You have to go back and you've got to watch it over and over and over to understand this complexity, especially knowing Sinclair's ultimate fate. Every time I watch a first season episode now, I notice more and more of it. And man, they had way more going on than you can possibly realize.
And that's why I've always, when we first started talking about this, you wanted to get me on, I think it was Filibuster, to talk about season 5, but I've always been I've always been a big defender of season 1, where I know a lot of fans, both past and present Babylon 5 fans, saying it's one of the weakest of the series. I think it's one of the strongest of the series.
I mean, I think every season is strong in its own way, and you can't have the strength and the action, which is what a lot of people go toward with seasons 3 and 4, because they're exciting and there is a lot of things happening there. But if they had not done the legwork and built us such a beautiful situation in seasons 1 and 2, you would not have had seasons 3 and 4 as good as they were. And you can't have the falling action of season 5.
Right.
Without that.
I mean, because it is the first, at least in my experience, the first serialized series of TV that I've ever seen, that's how this works. You never pick up it's like you never pick up a book and say, wow, those first 3 pages were the best pages I've ever read in this entire book. No one's ever said that ever. Right? It's always
probably not. No. I mean, if you're starting off that big and then it's all downhill from there, you don't need to keep reading.
Yeah, but I mean, you get no character exposition, you get no world building, you really don't get any background or history, you don't have anything that anchors the story, you have nowhere to go, right? So that's why I love season 1.
Yeah, if season 1 hadn't done a good job of building the world, giving us these characters and their introduction, and not done a good job of ramping up, we wouldn't have had a good rest of the show. So it's highly underappreciated because it's doing a lot of hard work, and as a viewer, it's hard to understand all that goes into that right away.
So we are at that time that we're at the magic hour. And I can't believe how
past.
my room is so dark now because
the sun has gone down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, daylight savings. That's what's happening here. So as Earl says, it is rising action, and it's not just about baking bread. That sounds really good right now. Some bread.
I love the smell of bread.
Fresh baked bread. Oh, I don't know if there's anything better.
Yeah, there is.
So good.
The smell of freshly cooked bacon.
Okay. I don't know. I disagree. I'm going to get some hate mail for that, but that's fine. I would get bread. I would do fresh baked bread over bacon any day.
Sorry to hear that.
More for you.
Yes, absolutely. And then I'll take that bread, soak it in my bacon, right?
Okay.
That would be perfect. And have breakfast.
All right. You do you. When it comes to fresh baked bread, I like to just eat it straight up. Just the warmth and the texture, unbeatable.
I like that with a little bit of Earl Grey in the morning.
Oh, do you drink Earl Grey? Nice.
I do.
Jean-Luc Picard would be proud.
But Garrick would not be, and that's more important to me.
Well, lest we forget, you are reviewing DS9 for mission logs, so that is kind of at the top of your list right now.
I've always loved Garrick. I would love to have seen a Garrick type character on Babylon 5. He would have been so cool.
Oh, that would have been interesting.
Or just Andrew Robinson in general, or Jeffrey Combs.
Sure. Right. Yeah. Well, wasn't Jeffrey Combs on B5 in a couple of guest roles? Maybe a guest role.
Well, I mean, aside from Harriman Gray, I think I was the only role that he played.
Okay. Yeah, he wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't much. It wasn't like Star Trek, but
no Andrew Robinson at all.
No, lest we forget. All right. Well, shall we close this one out here? We're going to have to think about what we want to do next week, how we want to piggyback our topics here. If anybody has any suggestions, what we ought to do is we ought to plug the Discord, and you can put it in there because that is the place to find it. So let me grab a link real quick. I will do that. If you're watching this a couple of days after we have aired this live cast, this link might not work, and you can always hit me up though. And my handle is the Profanity. Norm, where can people find you?
At Lounge Lizard. That's LAONGE Lizard.
Yeah, if you just add us, we can give you an invite link, but they expire after, I think, 24 hours. So they don't last long. That way we don't get a bunch of spammers or people trying to crash the party. And we've got a really good group of folks who love Babylon 5 as much as we do in there. And we talk all things, including Babylon 5, but not limited to it at all. We discuss everything. And of course, we post lots of photos of our cats.
And if there's anything, Char, that you weren't able to get to in this conversation, at least here on the Zocalo on YouTube, there's always the possibility of opening up the conversation on Discord to continue the fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can continue it there. Not a problem. That's kind of in part why we started the whole thing. So that's what it's for. Let's do that. If there's some points that maybe we didn't catch in the comments or what have you, let's keep it going. There's so much to dissect here.
And that's it. We are wrapped up. We are out of time, and we are
we are out. And we haven't plugged our merch in a while because we need to update the store. So if you're thinking about getting a shirt, we love the fact that you want to support. Let us get you some good, fresh merch first, though. We need to get off mic and discuss that, Norm.
Yeah, for sure. We'll take that. And you know what? Any ideas, say here or on Discord or welcome? What would you like to do? I mean, you guys are buying it, so you might as well have a say in what you're going to wear.
Yeah, if you've got suggestions, we're always listening. You guys have great ideas. And so, yeah, definitely willing to listen.
All right. Well, thanks everybody again for joining us here on the Zocalo on our live chat that we have every Sunday, or we try to hold every Sunday when time and real life permits.
That's right.
But until next time, make sure that you follow us and join us on the Discord, as Char has linked here. And we look forward to crafting our idea for the next discussion. But until next time, I have been Norm. She's been Char. She did a fantastic job, by the way, prepping for this show. She did a phenomenal job. And,
I wrote the notes.
She did, and they are phenomenal. So,
well, thank you, Char.
We will see you next time. Same Zocalo time, same Zocalo channel. And until then, be seeing you.